Micah's name hadn't been spoken in his family's house in almost 10 years. Not out of grief, out of choice. When he came out at 17, his mother looked at him with a face that never cracked. But something behind her eyes shut completely. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said, "Don't say that again." And the next morning, he woke up to his bags at the door. No fight, no goodbye. Just absence, quiet and clean like a razor. That was the last time he stood in that house as a son. He wasn't a rebel. He didn't run wild. He was just a boy who liked poetry more than sports, liked baking with his aunt, and kept photos of Elton John next to his science textbooks. He didn't understand what made him so difficult to love. The rejection didn't come in a storm. It was a slow freeze. Relatives stopped calling. His name disappeared from Christmas cards. When his father died a few years later, he wasn't even told about the funeral until it had passed. Micah rebuilt. He moved to Atlanta, started over, and built a quiet life as an event designer. He worked hard. He never asked for anything. But when he learned that his mother was turning 60, he felt something stir in him, something irrational and stubborn. Despite everything, he still wanted to give her something beautiful. Maybe it wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was just about showing that he still could, that he still existed. If this story resonates with you or someone you know, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. What's coming next might hit harder than you think. Micah didn't expect a thank you. He just wanted it done right. A quiet part of him, long hardened by distance and survival, understood that he would never be the golden child. But if he could make this one evening beautiful for her friends, for the memories she clung to, maybe it would be enough. Enough to stand in the same space as everyone else and not be invisible. Enough to be seen. He chose the venue carefully, a restored garden restaurant 2 towns over. Not too flashy, not too plain. It was the place his parents used to visit before his father passed away. He remembered it from stories how his father would take his mother there on Sundays when they were young, how they once danced under the patio lights before anyone else arrived. He called the manager, explained the significance, and made sure everything from the lighting to the dessert menu was tailored to her taste. No one else in the family stepped forward to help. Not her 3 other children, not her cousins, not even her closest friends had been told she was turning 60. Micah spent nights combing through old photo albums to gather contact information. He found numbers, messaged people, designed printed invites that looked like handwritten notes. He called the florist himself and walked through the space twice with the decorator. He wasn't just organizing a party, he was stitching together a family narrative that had unraveled without him in it. He didn't tell her immediately. He wasn't sure she would show up if she knew he was behind it. So he planned everything quietly, confiding only in his friend Devin and his assistant at work. His partner didn't even know the full scope. "It's not about winning her back," Micah said once, almost to himself. "It's about finishing something I never got to start." The guest list grew longer each day. Former co-workers of his mother, old church friends, the woman who used to braid her hair in the 90s, even the owner of the corner store from her old neighborhood. Every time Micah spoke to someone, they'd pause and say, "She never mentioned you." He'd nod. "That's all right, this isn't about me." 2 days before the party, he drove to his childhood neighborhood to drop off a handmade invitation and a card. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, just the paint and the faces. He parked 3 houses down from the one he grew up in. The lawn was trimmed, the blinds were drawn. It didn't look like a house where silence lived, but it did. He stood on the front step longer than he meant to. When the door opened, it was her. She looked exactly the same, neat, proud, reserved. She greeted him with no real emotion, only a flicker of something that could have been surprise or annoyance or both. He handed her the envelope and simply said he hoped she'd come. She took it without opening it, said nothing. Micah didn't wait for her to say more. He turned back down the steps with the same quiet dignity he'd carried all his life. That night he couldn't sleep, not because of nerves, because he knew that every detail he'd planned, every song on the playlist, every place card, every center table arrangement might never even be acknowledged. But he still checked his phone at 3 a.m. to see if she had RSVP'd. She hadn't. Still, the next morning he finalized everything, sent confirmations, double-checked the seating chart, called to make sure the gluten-free cake, her favorite, was delivered on time. He even printed an old black and white photo of her and his father laughing in the kitchen, one of the only photos he had kept when he was forced to leave. He placed it in a silver frame and asked the restaurant to set it beside the main table. He didn't know if she would come, but if she did, she wouldn't have to pretend the night wasn't perfect. She could just be, surrounded by everything he remembered she loved. He didn't expect a thank you, but he hoped maybe she'd look around and feel something more than shame, something closer to grace. The morning of the party arrived with stillness, not nervousness, not excitement, just a kind of silence Micah had come to recognize. It was the silence of knowing too much and hoping too little. He got dressed early, ironed his shirt twice, and stared at the small boutonniere he'd pinned to his lapel. White orchid, her favorite. He checked his phone one last time. No missed calls, no texts, no RSVP. Still, he drove to the venue on time, arrived before the staff, and walked the perimeter like he was walking the edge of something final. The tables were perfectly laid out, warm lights strung across the patio, the scent of gardenia drifting from the centerpieces he'd handpicked himself. The framed photo of his parents sat beside the main chair, the silver frame catching the light just right. For a moment, he stood in front of it and let himself believe she might smile when she saw it, that she might for a second feel what he had felt putting it there. A bridge, not a bruise. The guests began to arrive slowly, each one surprised, even startled, to see Micah. They had known of him vaguely or not at all. Some gave him tight smiles and curious glances. Others, older women with familiar eyes, touched his arm and whispered, "She never said you were the one doing all this." He nodded politely, repeating the same answer he'd used before. "It's something I wanted to do." The restaurant filled with voices and glasses clinking. Waiters brought out appetizers. The playlist began to hum beneath the buzz of conversation. Everyone kept asking the same question. "Is she coming?" Micah kept checking the door. Each time it opened, something in him tensed, prepared. But each time it wasn't her. 30 minutes passed, then an hour, then dessert, and still the chair beside the framed photo remained empty. One of her longtime friends, a woman in a blue dress who had once babysat Micah as a toddler, leaned in and said she'd spoken to his mother a week ago. She said she'd heard something about a party, but wasn't sure if she'd go. "She didn't sound comfortable," the woman added, choosing her words carefully. Micah understood. He continued to smile, continued to refill glasses, continued to thank guests for coming, as if nothing inside him had gone silent. Eventually, as the crowd thinned and people began to leave, Micah stood alone on the patio. The lights flickered slightly in the wind. One of the staff offered to help him pack up, but he waved them off. He wanted to do it himself. He folded the linens, gathered the leftover place cards, unplugged the speaker system. When he reached the head table, he stared once more at the silver-framed photo. He didn't cry. He didn't even feel anger. Just a quiet confirmation that what he suspected all along had been true. He could build something beautiful, but he couldn't make her walk into it. He carried the frame back to his car, seatbelted it in the passenger side as if it were fragile, as if it had held something worth protecting. Driving home, he didn't think of the guests, or the food, or the compliments he had received. He thought only of that one chair. Empty. Still. When he got home, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from his younger sister. Just 2 words. "She's laughing." He stared at the screen for a long time, then tapped the message open. Attached was a video clip, short, shaky, filmed by someone else at the family house. It showed their mother sitting at the dining table, surrounded by Micah's siblings, sipping from a glass of wine. Someone had asked her about the party. She laughed, loud and easy, then said, "That boy always did like to perform. I bet he cried when I didn't show." Drama runs deep in that one. They all laughed, the kind of laugh people use when they know they've won. Micah didn't react, not yet. He just stared at the clip, let it replay once, then again. There on that screen was everything he had ever feared. Not just rejection, but mockery. Not just distance, but delight in his pain. He thought of the table settings, the candles, the cake that went half-eaten. He thought of that empty chair, and how in some cruel twist, it had become a better symbol than her presence ever could. He put the phone down. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of it. But even as it crashed into him, something shifted. He was no longer the boy who begged to be seen. He was the man who had created something she would spend the rest of her life trying to pretend didn't matter. Micah didn't respond to the video. He didn't tell anyone he'd seen it. He simply saved it, locked his phone, and returned to work on Monday like nothing had happened. The world didn't know what had taken place that weekend. All they saw was a polished photo he had posted on Instagram, a quiet image of candlelight, flowers, and an empty chair, captioned only with, "Love doesn't always need a witness." The comments poured in, mostly from those who had attended, messages of awe and respect. "That was the most beautiful event I've been to in years. She's lucky to have a son like you." Micah replied to none of them. He let the compliments settle somewhere outside himself, like raindrops on glass. He had built something that night, but not for applause. It wasn't until Thursday that he made a decision. He opened his laptop, pulled up his email, and began to write, not to his mother, but to everyone who had attended. Friends, former neighbors, old family friends, church ladies, former co-workers of hers, over 70 names in total. The subject line read, "Thank you for attending and for seeing me." The body of the email wasn't angry, it was precise. He wrote that the event had meant more to him than he had ever expected, that he had organized it alone, that he had done so despite not being spoken of in his family for over a decade, that he had done it knowing full well his mother might not come. He included no bitterness, no accusations, just facts, memories, quiet truths. And at the end, he added the video. He didn't frame it with commentary. He didn't try to explain it. He let it speak for itself. Then he hit send. He shut his laptop, went for a walk, and tried not to think about what would happen next. The responses came within hours. Some were brief, 2 or 3 words. "I'm so sorry. We had no idea." Others were longer. One woman wrote that she had always wondered why she hadn't seen Micah at family events. Another admitted she had assumed he had moved away by choice. A man who had known his parents for decades said he felt ashamed to have accepted the invitation without asking who was behind it. But it was the messages from his mother's own friends that struck hardest. One wrote, "She told us you had gone north and never looked back. She never said she pushed you out." Another, "You built that evening with love. I saw it in every corner. She chose not to show up, but you showed all of us who you really are." Micah didn't reply to any of the emails. He didn't need to. He had never wanted vindication. But he had wanted the silence to end, and now it had. Not with a scream, but with a reckoning. That weekend, something unexpected happened. A local community newsletter, small, mostly read by older residents, ran a short piece titled, "A Son's Gift in a Mother's Absence." It didn't name anyone, but it described a birthday party that had become something more. The man who hosted it, the piece read, did not do it for recognition. He did it to remind us that love, when unreturned, can still exist and still matter. Micah hadn't written the article. He didn't even know who had. But someone in that room had decided the story needed to be told. He received a call that afternoon from an unknown number. He didn't answer. Later, a text came through. It was his sister again. This time it read, "She's crying. She says people are judging her. She says you've ruined her reputation." Micah read it twice, then turned off his phone. What his mother had never understood was this. She had erased him for years, and he had said nothing. He had swallowed it, carried it, rebuilt from it, but once he spoke, she couldn't erase herself from the truth. That wasn't revenge, it was balance. Micah didn't think much about closure. It was a word people liked to use when they wanted something painful to end neatly. But nothing about this was neat. Not the rejection, not the years in silence, and certainly not the sudden rush of people now trying to process what he had quietly endured for over a decade. His mother never called him directly. She called others, whispered versions of the truth, painting herself as the victim of a public ambush. That her gay son had staged a show to shame her, that the video was taken out of context, that he had edited it, that he had always been manipulative. She said these things to anyone who'd listen, but fewer people were listening now. A week later, Micah received a thick envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside were old photographs, him as a baby, his parents holding him. His graduation picture creased from where it had clearly been folded and tucked away. And a single note, 6 words. "You went too far this time." No signature, just that. Micah stared at the envelope. He didn't cry. He didn't even feel anger anymore. Only clarity. He walked into his office, took out the photo frame from the birthday event, the one of his mother and father laughing in the kitchen, and slid one of the photos from the envelope behind it. The image of himself at age 8, gap-toothed, joyful, holding a homemade birthday card. It didn't belong to anyone else now. Just him. That night, he posted one last image. The same table from the event, same flowers, same empty chair. But this time the caption read, "They left the seat empty," but somehow it became the loudest voice in the room. He turned off comments, and finally he slept. Some stories don't end with reunions. Some end with truth standing alone, but no longer afraid. Have you ever shown up for someone who refused to see you? What would you do if it was your own family? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. At Heart Stories, we believe your voice matters even if they never asked to hear it.